Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for stopping by again. So today's video, obviously we're going to be talking about the status of the nation, the status of this republic. It's obviously clear that the only thing really that's happening or of major importance and significance, not only in this country but across the world, is this coronavirus. It has been a tough time for everyone. People have experienced loss of family members and friends. People have lost their jobs. There's just been a lot of loss, and it's just been heavy, and it's just been difficult to try and process. And it's almost like, when trying to deal with one, here comes another. And I feel like as a people, as a collective, as a nation, as the world, really haven't had time to stop and process all of the loss that we're experiencing. And it's tough. It really just has been a tough time, and I mean, there's really nothing else to say. We're just really going through a really tough time, and we're just at the point where we're just hoping and we're praying for things to get better for all of us. But what I wanted to talk about specifically with the status of the nation is everything around the vaccine. Now, at this point, there's just so many different things and so many different stories that we're hearing about the vaccine that it's just difficult to keep track. So for me, the biggest thing concerning this vaccine really just came down to where we're going to get it and how much is it going to cost. And it's interesting to me because it seems like right at the beginning of lockdown last year, around March, when all of these conversations were having and money was being put in solidarity funds, and we were coming up with all different strategies, and there was this 500 billion, amount of money. It's clear that no one really considered the cost of this vaccine, because I have to wonder, when doing all of that and when all of that money was raised, how come in that plan of that 500 billion, nothing was really factored in terms of the cost of the vaccine? I only say this because it was only last week where the president was talking about how Treasury just has to find that money. That Treasury is just going to do whatever it takes, but they're going to find the money for us to be able to afford this vaccine. And that's why I was confused, because I'm like, in all of the planning and in the collecting of the money and all of these things, no one was saying, hey guys, when a vaccine does become available, maybe now we need to start thinking and planning and putting money towards that. But okay. So after the president said that, Treasury basically came back and said one of the things that they're considering is to increase taxes, and that South Africans must just bite the bullet. Here's the problem. South Africa as a nation, we are already so overtaxed. There really is no more space to move. I mean, even when you consider when there was that increase in VAT to being 15%, already it just was chaotic and pandemonium, because there really was just no room. The tax base simply wasn't growing, and there was no space for the government to say that they wanted to increase here or there in order to increase the revenue. So that's why it's interesting when Treasury says one of the things they're considering is increasing taxes, because my first question is, increasing them where? People's salaries didn't increase, people didn't get bonuses, things have just been tough even for businesses having to lay people off. Which made me realize that collection for the next coming years, things are going to be very tricky, because when we're talking about people, experiencing salary cuts, people lost their jobs, people were not making money the way that they were, which means that they were not spending money the way that they were, which means that the budget is going to look tricky. Our collection is also going to be incredibly tricky over the next couple of years. Because the truth is, the pool from which they collect revenue has gotten smaller, has gotten significantly smaller, and I think the impacts of that we're still going to be seeing over the next coming years when we're talking about collection. So yes, I understand, when we're talking about social responsibility, the appeal there to say, okay, fine, tax us if it's going to ensure that the rollout of this vaccine is going to be efficient. I understand, that social component and almost coming to people from that angle. The issue is, with so much corruption that we've seen, not only with this 500 billion that no one really wants to talk about, PPE money, just, I don't know, people stealing food parcels, UIF money also just being stolen. It's been unending. The stories have been too many. And then with all of that happening, to come back and look at the public and say, we're going to tax you more, that's why people are upset. And I think if they keep at it, or they keep having this conversation, or they keep throwing it out in the public, people are going to revolt. I mean, people have been talking about it for the longest time that, we're on the cusp of a tax revolt. I could actually see it really, really happening this time around. So in all of this conversation about how we're going to afford the vaccine, enter the Reserve Bank. The governor of the Reserve Bank, Lesetja Kganyago, said basically that the Reserve Bank would make itself available, or rather would make funds available to help the government be able to, I guess, acquire the vaccine. And they were talking about how they'll make foreign currency available, because chances are obviously we're going to be buying it from international sources. The other challenge and problem that I'm having is that at this point, government hasn't really indicated how much they need. Right, in terms of just their actual amount. They haven't indicated how much they need. We know what it will be costing us from different nations and different labs and different companies to buy, but they don't know, or they're not saying how much it's going to cost. So it's interesting that the Reserve Bank is also just saying, hey, we'll provide you with the funds. But also to me, I'm like, look what you have happening here. The Reserve Bank, this isn't their mandate. It's not their responsibility. This is the responsibility of government, which again I think goes back to that conversation of saying people are feeling like this government does not want to be trusted, because even with something like this, that they have to be going to the Reserve Bank and saying, please borrow us money. Everything about this vaccine and how we're going to acquire it and how we're going to pay for it, it just keeps making me nervous all the time. Talking about costs again, what is it called? The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, I think that's how it's pronounced, I could be wrong. I was reading an article that basically said that South Africa would be paying 2.5 times more to actually acquire this vaccine. So our DDG of Health said that the explanation that they were given in terms of why we're paying so much more is that high income earning countries had basically contributed to the research and development of this vaccine, so they were getting a discounted price. And I kind of feel like this has been the conversation around this vaccine, and it's something that we've all known, that countries with high income are going to be able to afford this. I mean, there are even countries that have bought more vaccines than they actually need, effectively hoarding the vaccine. Though I'm not really surprised that that's what's happening, because I mean, we all knew that this is what it was going to come down to. And that's the thing about this virus, is that it has sort of I won't even really say exposed, but it's really brought to the front everything that we've said generally about income inequality across the world. And we're seeing it now even when it comes to the vaccines. The wealthier nations have access to it faster. They can pay less for it. They even have more than what they need, effectively hoarding. And the poorer nations, it's going to take longer, and we're going to be the ones to suffer the most. And then outside of that, we have to be dealing with politicians and people in power spreading all sorts of false information about this virus and the vaccine and the 5G towers and all of the things that they're doing. It's like we have a pandemic, and then we have to deal with people who are saying all types of other nonsense when it comes to this. And it's really been low-key entertaining, but actually really, really very frustrating. The problem also with all of this is that all of these conspiracy and all of the things that people are saying, it filters, and there are so many people who then take it and just assume that it's factual and it's the truth, right? So even a lot of people just being like, well, the government mustn't force us to take this vaccine. I'm like, maybe I missed it, because I can't remember a time where the government said they're going to be forcing people to take this vaccine. Also, consider the government that you're talking about. This is the same government that the Constitutional Court had to force them to provide ARVs to people. This isn't a government that is just going to be compelling you to take this vaccine. They just don't do that, because history has proven that they need to be compelled to effectively do their job. So no one is going to be forcing anyone to take this vaccine. And I think putting it that way is fear-mongering, and it's making it look like, sinister things are happening. And here's the other thing. I personally have been very entertained, because clearly, we have all of these scientists and vaccinologists in this country that we never knew about, because suddenly everybody knows what's in this vaccine and what it does and what it doesn't do. And I'm like, maybe we wait for the doctors, maybe we wait for the people who've actually researched this, right? For them to be like, this is what it does. And I feel like it's pretty safe to then say, you know what, we're going to take their word versus you. Because I can't imagine it being easy for the scientists and all the people who are involved in this, because now as a scientist, because of the conspiracy theories, you now have to prove to people that this vaccine doesn't have, you know, a gene altering, you know, 666 that's going to infect people. And it like, what? I honestly feel like I would be very incredibly frustrated, because I feel like even after you do all of that, like, they still won't believe you, because it's like, that's what conspiracy theorists do. They can find a way to explain everything away. And I'm like, awful, just terrible. Because even for the people who are like, no, this is just a way for them to like microchip us, I'm like, so there's going to be a microchip in the liquid, in the syringe. Okay, that's very interesting. So you're not going to be able to see it, right? Because I can hear it now. The argument is like, no, it's going to be teeny tiny, you won't be able to see it, but it's going to be in the liquid form. Cool. And you think that this republic is going to be the one to have figured out this microchip and then put it in you? Okay, so if it's not this republic, it's whatever lab that we're buying it from, right? Because Bill Gates is trying to keep track of you and the things that you're doing, but not your phone, right? Not your smartwatch that literally keeps track of your heart rate and your mood and your sleeping patterns. Not your phone that keeps track of your buying patterns and where you go, that, you know, has your banking details. Not that one. That's not where the tracking is going to happen. It's going to be in the chip that they're going to put in the vaccine. And also not all the vaccines that you've been receiving up until this point of your adult life. Okay, all right. But of course we know that this will not be a problem for the super rich. And here's the thing, right? I understood the outrage from the onset, you know, that Johan Rupert, you know, is just cutting the line and he can get the vaccine, blah, blah, blah. But then I was like, it's funny to me, because I'm like, were people really expecting a billionaire to be ethical? No, it's it was just really funny, because people were just like, no, we can't believe it. Because even the politicians in Switzerland, you know, this whole like, we need to know what's happening, whatever. I'm like, one, I never expect billionaires or super wealthy people to be ethical, because I am of the firm belief that you cannot be that wealthy and have done it ethically. And that's a hill I'm willing to die on. There are no ethical multi-millionaires and billionaires. It doesn't happen. So I don't expect them to act ethically. So the outrage of like, I can't believe it, I was like, wait, just hold on. The truth of the matter is that I have to believe he's not the first and only rich person to cut in line when it comes to things like this, right? I think the anger here is the fact that everybody found out about it. I honestly have to believe that that's really the issue here, that so many people then found out about the fact that he cut the line, and now they have to, we're angry, rah, rah, rah. But I think, you know, the super wealthy have been cutting lines, not just with this, but with everything else. So to me, it just was like, it wouldn't be any different. You know, that when the vaccine suddenly became available, that they would find ways to cut lines. And he just used his money, his access, you know, his resources to get on a plane and go to Switzerland and cut in line and get the injection. Like, hey. I think if anything, what we should be doing, or the conversation that we should be having, is to say that it is not right that we live in a world with such great inequalities, that you have people who are able to do things like this, you know. And for me, things like this are just further proof that it's simply not okay, you know. And the fact that the inequalities just keep, you know, stretching and stretching, and the divide just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. If anything, this is a lesson of why the super wealthy, like, it's a problem, you know. And that's why I'm part of, you know, Eat the Rich. I'm ready, because it's unacceptable. It really is unacceptable. And the last thing that I want to talk about is Dr. Death. Yes, that's his name. I'm not going to be using any other name, none of that. That's his name. For those of us who didn't know and who found out, I guess, maybe a week and a half or so ago, is that Dr. Death is a practicing medical doctor, and he's practicing under the Mediclinic umbrella or whatever it is that you call it, because people went on the Mediclinic website and they found him there. So of course, naturally, when people found him there, they were like, what the hell? So they reached out to Mediclinic and were like, what is happening? So then of course, when people reached out to Mediclinic, Mediclinic, provided the standard answer. It was on social media, so it's almost like, they typed out one response and they were sending it to everybody, and that's basically what it said. And for me, the problem isn't even just Mediclinic. It's when I consider Mediclinic, it's when I consider that the same Dr. Death was hired as a lecturer at Stellenbosch University to teach the medical student. And I'm just like, okay, because in a learning institution, when you're going to hire someone to say, please come and teach, you're calling them because they have an expertise. You're calling them because you're saying, the minds that we're trying to shape, they could learn from you. They are going to benefit from you. And I have to look at Stellenbosch and be like, really? This is the person that you felt that the medical doctors of tomorrow need to be learning from? This guy. And this is the thing also about living in this country, is that so many times we will be in the presence and we will encounter people who did heinous things in apartheid not that long ago. So you could be a student and you walk into a lecture hall and there is, I guess, Dr. Death or whoever else who was in charge of, the firing squad, or the people who, may have even killed some of your family members and some of your friends. This is the trauma that we're confronted with every single time when you live in this republic, that you could go to a doctor not knowing that, oh no, that doctor used to be the second in command of whoever else who was doing heinous things, or you're just in corporate and, oh, that senior partner who's 60, 70 years old, understanding that he lived in that time, right? And to a degree was complicit to everything that's happening in that time, and we're just supposed to engage. It's very, very difficult when we're constantly confronted with these things, especially when we're talking about people who really never had to face the consequences of their actions and the things that they've done. So let's talk about, Dr. Death and the fact that, Stellenbosch felt like this is the man to teach the generation, or Mediclinic felt like this is the guy when you're sick, you can book through us and you can go see him and be your doctor. This is a guy who was in charge of a program called Project Coast. And Project Coast was what the apartheid government had set up as, its chemical and biological warfare program, and he was heading that. So what are some of the things that he did? Well, in the 1980s, he tried but failed to develop a vaccine to give to black women to make them infertile as a way to then reducing population growth of black people. He then later had this bright idea of coming up with a substance that could kill people but wouldn't be detected in a post-mortem, kill black people, but wouldn't be detected in a post-mortem. So that's when he came up with tear gas and Mandrax, the drug. So then what he did is that this project took those Mandrax drugs and they filled them in the black and colored community. Almost 70 million pills were pumped out into these communities as a way to encourage gangsterism, to increase violent crimes, and basically, get people hooked and dependent, and thus establishing this culture of substance abuse. And this is obviously just very small, very few examples, because I really couldn't put myself through going through everything and really researching and looking up all of the things that he's done, because I'm like, it's just a lot. But just those things that I've mentioned, this is who this man is. It's anti-black medicine. It's the deep-seated racism, and this is who this man is. The architect in this republic of anti-black medical racism. This is who this man is. So it's disappointing when Mediclinic gives the response that they gave. It really is very disappointing. There's a Twitter user, I'll put the details there, and she basically went to the museum of Project Coast, and you know, she took pictures of all the various household products where they were putting, you know, botulism and mandrax and all types of poisons in the food that people were eating. The project that Dr. Des was heading up, in the food that people were eating as a way to kill us. And we're just being told that, hey, he's gonna practice, like, what can you do? And I'm like, again, only in this republic can this be the truth and the reality of someone who has done such heinous things, that they can still thrive, they can teach, they can practice, only in this republic. And that's why when Nova said all this country does is break our heart, she was right. She really, really was right. Anyway guys, that is the end of this video. It really was just a rambling on vaccines and how things are looking dicey for us in this country, but let me know what you guys think. I love obviously hearing from you guys. Please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.